So today I wanted to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves because they have been absolutely fantastic to start the season. They have a 5-2 record. They just got a very impressive win against the Boston Celtics. I think they also just beat the Pelicans right after that. And this team has looked beyond even my relatively high expectations for them. I believe when it came to my NBA standings, my overall predictions, my power rankings, they were going to end up roughly as like the 7th seed. And you know, there's still time for them to fall down a little bit, especially given how competitive the Western Conference is. But they have looked like one of the better teams in the conference, which I did not necessarily expect. I did think they were going to be a lot better than they were in the previous season, but they are a lot better since the previous season. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. So the first thing that stands out is the defense. They are number 1 in the league in defense, and when you look at their personnel, that makes a good amount of sense. However, that has historically not been the case. They were number 10 in defense last year, historically as in last season, which was a little disappointing given that personnel, because Rudy Gobert is Rudy Gobert, and even though he maybe is like 10% worse defensively than he was back when he was winning DPOY regularly, that's still a very good defensive anchor. And then you talk about Jaden McDaniels, who's a 6'10 forward with long arms, really smart positionally in terms of like being in the right place at the right time, excellent weak side shot blocker, very good perimeter defender, and probably the best defender in the NBA that didn't make an all defensive team last season. So we're talking about 2 excellent big defenders who are excellent team defenders as well. That typically bodes well for being a good defense, and top 10 is still good, but number 1, a lot of people are saying that the defense might fall back down because it is early season. You can say that about literally everything, but I'm not so sure about that. It would not surprise me whatsoever if this team finished as the number 1 defense in the NBA, because on top of having those 2 guys, they also have Anthony Edwards, who improved quite a bit defensively in this previous season, but looks like he has fully entered just straight up being a lockdown player at this point. Defensively, this team is excellent, and I don't expect them to fall off like a lot of people have suggested they have. On the offensive end of things, they are getting, I don't want to say carried because it's been an overall good scheme, but a lot of it has just been Anthony Edwards being awesome. So far, he is averaging 28 points per game. He is shooting like 43% from 3. He's reduced his 3-point volume a little bit, and that has made him more efficient from there, and he's favored pull-up mid-ranges a little bit more, which, you know, mathematically isn't always necessarily the best, but he has been hitting them, so you really can't argue with it if those shots are going to go in. As a whole, he has looked really good offensively, and this is a leap that a lot of people expected, myself included. I think I predicted almost exactly 28 points per game for the guy. He's that dude, man. Anthony Edwards, he's been like still having his, you know, foot in the his toe in the pool. I have no idea how to put this. Still been a little bit in the territory of a prospect where it's like he is very good, but now he's just very good, and there's really no like asterisks on that or acknowledgement of, you know, just dumb shit from being a young player. At this point, he is playing like an NBA veteran and one that is one of the best players in the NBA. Anthony Edwards is definitely a top 20 player at this point, and I would not be surprised if we're talking about him at least being in the conversations of a top 10 player by the time the year is over. And then again, we got Rudy Gobert and we got Jaden McDaniels, who I think both of them have to be all defense this year. I think J-Mac is absolutely going to be proving to be worth that. The other big thing for this team offensively is that they didn't have to deal with a point guard switch in the middle of the season. I just did not feel like D'Angelo Russell was the right point guard for that team, and while Mike Conley is definitely older and not quite the player that he used to be, he does what he needs to do for point guard on this team, which is he hits his open threes, he plays solid enough defense for like a 35-year-old or however old he is at this point, and he makes the right plays with the ball in his hand. You know, he's not out there being the lead facilitator all that much, but he is making the right passes, making the right plays, and just making sure the offense as a whole is connecting well. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room here, which is Karl-Anthony Towns. It definitely feels like Cat at this point is just completely holding this team back, and, you know, as good as the Timberwolves have been, people are not going to be ready to call them a contender until he isn't really playing anymore. And that's unfortunate because the thing with Karl-Anthony Towns is he still possesses a ton of offensive talent. However, it's offensive talent that kind of has to play center for it to work properly. If you have Rudy Gobert out there with him, he's far less effective on the offensive end of the floor. And then, of course, he's not a very good defensive player, to put it lightly. And Rudy Gobert has been so good defensively, and the Timberwolves have hung their hat on defense to a degree where they're not going to pick Karl over Rudy at this point, especially given how much they paid to get Rudy. So he's the odd man out. And frankly, it's becoming increasingly obvious game by game by game. He has not played well this season, and he's been a net negative on both ends of the floor, because if you take, you know, it's like a round peg in a square hole type of situation, or a square peg in a round hole, because I guess the circle could fit in the square theoretically. You know, the point I'm getting at, he just doesn't fit this team. So that means we're talking about trades, and that also becomes a problem because he's not exactly the easiest player in the world to trade. Cat existing on this team next to Rudy Gobert is almost a litmus test for like the type of player that Cat is, and that is a very, very offensive-minded five, an offensive forward five, someone who the point is that he can score the fucking ball. He's a decent playmaker, but the dude can shoot really well. He's a solid finisher. He even has a little bit of post game to him. However, when he's sharing the floor with Rudy, really all he can do is be a floor spacer, which at that point, you would rather just have a forward out there who can also space the floor, maybe not quite as well as Karl-Anthony Towns, but then on the defensive end, he's going to be rock solid. And on offense, he's not going to be trying to do things that frankly, he just can't do within this scheme. The problem though, is because of the value of defense at the center position, you're seeing Rudy Gobert and you're seeing Karl-Anthony Towns playing together, and the guy who is all defense, no offense, and the guy who is all offense, no defense, pretty evident that the all defense, no offense guy is making way more of an impact and matters way more for actually winning. And that makes Karl look far worse by contrast, and thus makes his trade value practically nothing. So actually getting a great player, or even something that you can really use in return, is not ideal. You're probably going to have to attach draft picks to him in order to move him on. An idea that I've thought about was like some sort of forward. Maybe it's Jeremy Grant, maybe it's OG. You know, just hope those teams are cool taking on Cat for the salary filler. And then, man, it's crazy that we're talking about Karl-Anthony Towns as salary filler, but frankly, that's maybe be what he is at this point. And then, you know, a couple of first round picks, and then maybe they try to flip Cat somewhere else. I don't know. That's really the best that I can think of, because I'm just sitting here imagining this Timberwolves team, and instead of Cat, it's just like a forward who can hit open threes and play good defense, and you've already got J-Mac and Rudy Gobert, who are obviously playing great defense. You've already got Anthony Edwards, who's playing great defense, Mike Conley, who's playing solid defense. You get another good defender in there. You get another guy who can hit his open threes. That's really fucking good, man. And I think if Anthony Edwards and his rise to superstardom is official, if he's here truly as a superstar player, at that point, we're talking about a very legitimate contender, one that I think isn't as good as the Nuggets for sure, but one that could compete with them, especially given that they did compete with them in this previous postseason and now they are much better. I think you kind of have to make this happen one way or the other. The thing that's always weird about this is the Timberwolves, they built this roster around Karl-Anthony Towns, and then they accidentally built a roster that's better without him. So that's rough, but ultimately it's probably for the better and probably what both parties need at this point, because Cat isn't looking his best here. If anything, the Timberwolves are making him look bad pretty regularly, so a new environment would be better for him and better for the Timberwolves. I just don't know what that actual trade looks like. But the overall point of this video, the Timberwolves are good. I don't think it's a fluke, and I think it's something that you should be paying attention to, especially because Anthony Edwards is one of the most fun players in the entire league. With that said, that is it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.